Hey guys, Excoundrel here. I'm going to dive straight into it. This is my top 10 tips to succeed in TFT Set 3, and the first of which is know the comps. Now, if you like this content, please feel free to like and subscribe. It'll really mean a lot to me. I produce a lot of TFT content, and I'll be doing so over the next few months. So let's dive right into it. There's no point me telling you any tips for TFT if you don't know what you're building, so you need to find out the compositions. You find this out through content creators like myself or SuperJJ on Twitch, people like that, or websites like MOBALYTICS, TFTACTICS and LOLCHESS. I would thoroughly recommend LOLCHESS. It's a really good website to go and check out the top ranked players of any particular region and see what they're playing to win. When you are assessing a build guide, a good build guide will tell you the completed build, early, mid and late game strategies, who you are aiming to 3-star, the best items that you want for your composition, when to roll, and replacement alternative versions of the build. So when you're looking to learn about a build, you'll need to know all of those specific things to make sure that you get a good grasp of how the build works. So that is my tips for knowing the compositions. Let's move on to my next tip, which is understanding the economy. Now, this is going to be a fairly long point, and we're going to talk about this in a bit more detail. So what you need to know is the very basic rules of the economy. And that is mostly about win and loss streaks and interest gold. Interest gold, you gain 1 gold for every 10 gold you currently own, and that is all the way up to 50 gold. So you can generate a maximum of 5 gold interest per round. And for win and loss streaks, at 2 win-loss streaks, you gain an extra gold. At 3 win or loss streaks, you gain 2 extra gold. And if you're on a 4+ win or loss streak, you gain 3 extra gold. And that is the maximum amount of win or loss streak gold that you can generate. But it is a very quick ladder to get to 4+ win or loss streaks, generating you 3 extra gold per turn. The clip that I'm showing you in the background right now is a 300% speed clip of me generating a very quick economy by using a loss streak tactic and using space pirates to generate the extra gold income by killing enemy units. This is a good way to get to 50 gold as quickly as possible, and some builds will require you to get to 50 gold as soon as possible. You should know which builds require this and when you should be rolling to maximize your 3-star units. You can find this out from build guides and looking at content creators and watching how they play as well. Here is a basic economy and leveling guide. Feel free to screenshot this. I got this from JinxedJK. I will link him in the description below. I don't want to steal his content without kind of saying. So this is all from JinxedJK. I did not make this up. I just turned it into a slightly easier to read graphics. At round 2-3, you're going to want to have about 10 gold. By the Krug round, you should be looking to have about 30 gold. And if you have the income, get to level 5. Or if you feel like your level 4 composition will lose to Krugs, and a good indicator is if you have absolutely no 2-stars, you should be going to level 5. Because Krugs, it's more important to beat them and get the items than it is to have the 30 gold. Then you have 2 options. If you're on a win streak, you want to level 6 at around round 3-3, and maintaining 30 gold would be good. Otherwise, go to round 3-5 with 50 gold and get to level 6 there. Following then, you have 3 options. Level 6 slow roll. If you have a good level 6 composition, something like Infiltrator's Mechs is a really good version of this. Level 6 slow roll Protectors works really well as well. Level 7 is all in, is when you go to level 7 at round 4-1 and look to upgrade your units as much as possible. And a fast level 8 is by saving your interest and getting to level 8 by round 4-2. Otherwise, you want to get to level 8 by round 5-1. Very quick basic guide there. If you want to find out more and go into more detail, I'll link the specific video that JinxedJK made below because it is very informative, and I would very much recommend that you go and check out his Twitch streams, but also his YouTube channel. Collect pairs, especially 1 costs in the early game. You can sell them for the same price, and 2-stars can either help you force a win streak or help you build a composition. In this build here, you can see that I've randomly put a 2-star Twisted Fate in, even though I'm going to end up going mech Infiltrators. This Twisted Fate, combined with the Lux that I found early on, is giving me Sorcerer, but also is going to make me a powerful kind of early game threat, allowing me to generate some income in the early game, or potentially even go on a win streak. So make sure that you are not neglecting any random 2-stars that you can find. They're always quite useful, and again, remember 2-stars can also help you generate a kind of a direction in the composition that you want to have. So collecting pairs is always really good, and you can see on the bench right now I've got a pair of Zoes who I will eventually look to upgrade where possible. So that's kind of my kind of a little bit of advice about the early game. Collecting pairs is always a really good idea, and I would recommend that you do so where possible. Scouting in the early game. This is one of the most important things that you can do, because usually by about round 2-5 or 2-6, most people will have some kind of indication about what kind of build they're going. So you should be looking to go and have a look through all of your opponent's boards and checking out the kind of units that they have on their board, but also the kind of units that they're keeping on their bench. For instance, I'm doing that right now and checking all of the compositions to make sure that no one else is building a mech infiltrator composition. And as you can see, I am the only person building mech infiltrator. This basically confirms that I want to go this direction. If I was seeing 2 other people going mech infiltrator and they already had a better start than me, I may consider redoing my build and going for something different. Always check what kind of builds are being sort of occupied by other people, because it helps you get a direction for the build that you have in the early game. And this is one of the most important tips, because you cannot compete with 3 other people for the same build, especially if you are not on a massive win streak. If you're coming from behind, it is much easier to go for a composition that you do not currently have being contested on the board. Scouting not only applies to early game, scouting always applies to late game as well. There are a couple of major reasons that you want to scout in the late game. Usually this is with about 1 or 2 other people left. You're going to look for the positioning of the main enemy carries, and you're also going to be looking for any potential ZEPHYR positioning and overall composition positioning too, because obviously there are ways that people can try and counter you. In this particular instance, and I want you to watch what's happening on the screen right now, I scouted the guy that I know that I am facing next, which happens to be the mech sorcerer player. And I saw that his Syndra was kind of on the right-hand side of the board as if I were facing it. So I put the majority of my big carries, which is the Kai'Sa in this instance because I had her at 3-star, close enough to the Syndra so that she could slot in and then start to put pressure on her backline. The Vel'Koz I wasn't that worried about particularly, although the Vel'Koz is obviously very strong. I don't think he's as much of a threat as the Syndra. And this guy was on a massive win streak, obviously having beaten me before, and I managed to win this round just by positioning my infiltrators in a slightly better area, which allowed me to get a kill on the Syndra and knocking out the enemy competition. So make sure you're always checking the enemies in the late game for their positioning. This is an interesting point. This is talking about being flexible, but to an extent. Don't be the kind of person that plays comps that you have no idea how to play. Look to mostly have 3 to 4 comps that you play well. You want to know which items are the best of the build, and you want to know which units you 3-star and when you should be looking to level and roll. There is no point randomly playing compositions that you don't have a clue how to build, because you're just going to end up playing them badly, and that's unfortunately going to be a detriment to your rank. What you want to do is have 3 to 4 comps that you know really well and be flexible between them. Yes, okay, it is fine to force compositions that you feel comfortable with, but obviously if you don't get the units or someone else is going that build, you're going to find it more difficult. I do know people that basically spammed Rebels to Diamond and Master Tier when Rebels were really good, and obviously that is a good strategy as well, but having that breadth of knowledge is going to make you a better player. And you should definitely be looking to have those 3 to 4 comps that you know you can work and play well with. So that's my advice about being flexible. And again, this comes from experience, but also finding compositions that you feel like you can play well and you know which items work for you. Know how to counter position. I briefly talked about this just a moment ago, but you want to know how to counter position with specific things, like for instance, know how to counter BLITZCRANK. So BLITZCRANK will always pull the unit that is furthest away from him. So you want to make sure that if your BLITZCRANK is on the enemy team, you're putting a unit that you don't mind having pulled into the enemy team, like a tank or a really beefy guy, but make sure it's not one of your carries. You also need to know how to position versus an infiltrator build, and I'm showing you a clip of when I lost playing infiltrators because the enemy that I played versus positioned versus the infiltrators very well. He put some of his big backline carries, like the Master Yi and the Yasuo, on the backline, so they actually dealt the damage and killed my infiltrators whilst keeping his Kayle very safe. The Kayle was the main target that I was aiming for when playing the infiltrators, and he kept his Kayle incredibly safe by counter-positioning my infiltrators. And that's by placing the tanks and the more heavy health units at the back so that my infiltrators got distracted and didn't actually focus the real carry, which ended up getting him the win. So you need to know how to counter position certain builds like that because it is important. Tip number 8 is using items early where appropriate. Some items are good in many different compositions and they can help you win streak or save HP when you're losing. In this particular game, I was playing Space Pirates with Darius, and I found a GA. A GA is a very, very adaptable item that can be built across many different compositions, so combining a GA in the early game is always really good, for the most part. GA is probably one of those items that you can use in almost every composition in the game. So I was very happy to put that on my Darius, because not only would that make my composition a bit more beefy and strong, it would also allow my Darius to potentially get more gold by coming back to life and using his ultimate more often. And you can see it helped me pick off 1 or 2 extra units, which is helping save my HP on this loss streak. If you're playing cybernetics, know which items you want to commit to certain cybernetics in the early game to make sure that you're able to utilize that synergy. Cybernetics is unique where you need to commit items to make use of the synergy, so knowing which items to commit where in the early game is always really important also. So make sure you know which items are good to use early, and you know which ones you want to commit to a certain part of your composition. Number 9 is keep up with the meta. This is a kind of obviously a pretty basic point, but it kind of ties into knowing the compositions, but we've just had a balance patch. We just had update 10.7, which changed the way that certain compositions were played because there were lots of nerfs and buffs. So make sure that you follow the meta and understand which compositions are strong, and you can do that by content creators like myself or Twitch streamers, going to websites like MOBALYTICS, TFTACTICS, that kind of thing, LOLCHESS, but also going on community hubs like the competitive Teamfight Tactics Reddit, which will always talk about the comps that appear strong in the meta right now. For instance, you might notice that most of my videos here are spamming Mech Infiltrator. That is because people consider Mech Infiltrator one of the strongest builds in the game right now. And I find that very few people have cottoned on to it quickly because it was always good, but people often thought things like Rebels. And I'm still seeing people build Rebels in my games because they haven't quite realized that the meta has shifted and Rebels are not that good anymore. So make sure that you keep up with the meta because it's really important to your ability to climb the ladder and win ranked as much as possible. And finally, don't tilt. This might seem like a really obvious point, but auto battle is our RNG at the end of the day. So sometimes you're going to win and sometimes you're going to lose because you'll just get good and bad luck. Wins are technically considered a top 4 finish because you're going to gain LP from that most of the time. So focus on getting top 4s and don't worry about not coming first and don't worry about not coming top 3 in certain scenarios. And if you're losing too many, just take a break. There's normal League of Legends on the client as well, or you can always go and play another game also. Just make sure that you focus on being level-headed and understand that this is definitely an RNG-heavy game and you are obviously going to at some times be suspect and to bad RNG and bad luck, and it happens. So those are my top 10 tips for climbing in set 3. I hope they were helpful. If you liked, please don't feel afraid to leave a comment. I'll try and respond to you. And if you want any more beginner info guide, I have a beginner guide on the channel, but also I will link that JinxedJK channel in my description as well as the specific video talking about the leveling guide because I think he's a really good content creator and you should definitely go and check him out. All right, guys, thank you. See you soon.